Hello BookTube, it's time for another essay, and we're returning to Arnold Bennett, his Books and Persons, being Comments on a Past Epoch, 1908 to 1911, by Arnold Bennett. This was published in 1917 by Chatto Windus. My copy here is, my battered up copy, is the second impression, August 1917, and it was first published in June 1917. So we quickly went into second printing. And they are articles that Bennett wrote for the New Age from 1908 to 1911 under the pseudonym of Jacob Tonson. It doesn't say why he used the pseudonym. I don't know much about his writing career, so I don't know what the reason is, but the essay, or the article I'm reading today, is called Censorship by the Libraries. There's two of them that are back-to-back that are called that, but they're different articles. So we'll call this one Censorship by the Libraries number 1, and then I'll read the second one tomorrow. Now, this is talking about, it was published on 23rd of December 1909, and as far as I can tell, there was a controversy that started then, and this, I think he's talking about it, but I have not, again, looked too closely into it. But there will be a couple other things I wanted to mention at the end as well. So let's get stuck in. The immediate origin of the new attempt by the libraries to exercise a censorship over books, and particularly over novels, is quite accidental and silly. A woman socially prominent in the governing classes of the realm has a daughter. The daughter obtained and read a certain book from the circulating library. Naturally, the family is one of those that are too rich to buy books. It can only hire. The mother chanced to see the book and considered it to be highly improper. I have not read the book, but I should say that it is probably not improper at all, merely a trivial, foolish book. The woman went directly to an extremely exalted member of the cabinet, being a friend of his, and she kicked up a tremendous storm and dust. The result was that certain machinery was set in motion, and certain representations were made to the library. Indeed, the libraries were given to understand that unless they did something themselves, certain steps would be taken. It was all very vague and oppressive, and it brought recent agitations to a head. Hence the manifesto of the libraries, in which they announced that all books must be submitted in advance to a committee of hiring experts, and that the submitted books will be divided into 3 classes. The first class will be absolutely banned. The circulation of the second will be prevented so far as it can be prevented without the ban absolute. The circulation of the third will be permitted without restrictions. Of course, that even the suggestion of a censorship should spring from such a personal and trifling cause is very scandalous. But I am fairly sure that it might happen under any government and under any form of government. All governments must consist of individual members, and all individual members have friends. Most of them are acquainted with women, and with absurd women who will utilize the acquaintanceship with all their might for their own personal ends. And exceedingly few members of any government whatsoever would have the courage to tell a well-dressed and arrogant woman to go to the devil, even when that answer happened to be the sole correct answer to an impertinence. Wellington merely damned the portly darlings, but then Wellington, though preposterous as a politician, was a great man. The menacing letter from the libraries was received by the publishers on the very day of their council meeting. This may or may not have been accidental, but at any rate it put the publishers at a disadvantage. The council meetings of the Publishers Association, being dominated by knights and other mandarins, are apt to be formal and majestic in character. You can't blurt out whatever comes into your mind at the council meeting of the Publishers Association, and nearly everybody is afraid of everybody else. No one had the time to think the matter over, much less to decide whether surrender or defiance would pay best or look best. Consequently, the reply sent to the libraries was a masterpiece of futility. The mildly surprising thing is that the council itself, there was a strong pro-library party. Among this party were Messrs. Hutchison, and Mr. Heinemann. Messrs. Hutchinson, it is well known, have consistently for many years tried to publish only novels for family reading. It is an ambition like another, and one may admit that Messrs. Hutchinson have fairly well succeeded in it. Mr. Heinemann issues as much really high-class literature as any publisher in London. But if his policy has had a family and young lady tendency, that tendency has escaped me. He has published books, some of them admirable works, and some not, which a committee of hiring experts would have rejected with unanimous enthusiasm. It is needless to particularize, but Mr. Heinemann should have supported the libraries in the private deliberations of the publishers. I cannot imagine why. Sorry, let me do this again. Why Mr. Heinemann should have supported the libraries in the private deliberations of the publishers, I cannot imagine. But that is the fault of my imagination. I have an immense confidence in Mr. Heinemann's business acumen and instinct for self-preservation. The publishers, if they choose, could kill the censorship movement at once by politely declining to submit their books to the censorship. If only the three big fiction firms concerted to do this, the libraries would be compelled to withdraw their project. But the publishers will not do this, nor even three of them will do it. The only argument against a censorship is that it is extremely harmful to original literature of pertinent value, and such an argument does not make any very powerful appeal to publishers. What most publishers want is to earn as much money as possible with as little fuss as possible. Again, the Authors Society might kill the censorship conspiracy by declining to allow its members to sign any agreement with publishers which will contain a clause forbidding the publisher to submit the book to the committee of hiring experts. A dozen leading novelists would command the situation, but the Authors Society will do nothing effective. The official reply of the Authors Society was as feeble as that of the publishers. I repeat that the only argument against the censorship is that it is extremely harmful to original literature of pertinent value. Such an argument does not make any very powerful appeal to authors. What most authors want is to earn as much money as possible with as little fuss as possible. Besides the great money makers among the authors of weight with publishers and libraries have nothing to fear from any censorship. They censor themselves. They make the most particular care not to write anything original, courageous, or true, because these qualities alienate more subscribers than they please. I am not a pessimist nor a cynic, but I enjoy contemplating the real facts of the case. All the forces would seem to be in favor of the establishment of a censorship, and by a censorship I mean such a censorship as would judge books by a code which, if it was applied to them, would excommunicate the Bible, Shakespeare, Defoe, Richardson, Fielding, Sterne, Swift, Shelley, Rossetti, Meredith, Hardy, and George Moore. The ordeal of Richard Feverel would never, as a new work, pass the library censorship, nor would Jude the Obscure, nor half a dozen of Hardy's other books, nor would most of George Moore. Nevertheless, I am not very much perturbed. There are three tremendous forces against the establishment of genuine censorship, and I think that they will triumph. The first is that the mysterious nullifying force by which such movements usually do fizzle out. The second force against it lies in the fact that the movement is not genuinely based on public opinion. And the third is that there is a great deal of money to be made out of the merely silly, mawkish books which a genuine censorship would ban with serious original work. For such books, a strong demand exists among people otherwise strictly respectable, far stronger than the feeling against such books. The demand will have its way. A few serious and obstinate authors will perhaps suffer for a while, but then we often do suffer. We don't seem to mind. No one could guess, for instance, from the sweet Christian kindness of my general tone, towards Mr. Jesse Boot's library, that Mr. Jesse Boot had been guilty of banning some of my work, which I love most. But it is so. I suppose we don't mind, because in the end, dead or alive, we come out on top. I imagine that I had said the last word on this subject, and hence I intended to say no more, but it appears that I was mistaken. It appears from a somewhat truculent letter which I received from a correspondent that I have not yet even touched the fringe of the subject. Parts of this correspondent's letter are fairly printable. He says, "You look at the matter from quite the wrong point of view. There is only one point of view, and that is the subscribers. The libraries don't exist for the authors, but for us. He is a subscriber to Maudie's. We pay, and the librarians are for our convenience. The libraries are for our convenience. They are not for the furtherance of English literature, or whatever you call it. What I say is, if I order a book from a library, I ought to be able to get it, unless it has been confiscated by the police. I don't pay my subscription in order to have my choice of books limited to such books as some frock-coated personage in Oxford Street thought good for me. I've spent about 40 years in learning to know what I like in literature, and I don't want anybody to teach me. I'm not a young girl. I'm a middle-aged man, but I don't see why I should be handicapped by that. And if I am to be handicapped, I'm going to chuck Maudie's. I've already written them a very rude letter about Mr. De Morgan. It can never happen again. I wanted that book. They told me they didn't supply it. And then I made a row. They wrote me a soothing letter nearly as long as the epistle to the Ephesians, explaining why they didn't supply it. Something about 2 volumes and half a sovereign. I don't know. I don't even care. I don't care whether a book's in 1 volume or in 100 volumes. If I want it, and if I've paid for the right to have it, I've got to have it, or I've got to have my money back. They mumbled something in their letter about having received many complaints from other subscribers about novels being in 2 volumes. But what do I care about other subscribers? And he continues after a deviation into forceful abuse. I don't want to force novels in 2 volumes down the throats of other subscribers. I don't want to force anything down their throats. They are obliged to take what they don't want. There are lots of books circulated by Maudie's that I strongly object to, books that make me furious, as regards both moral and physical heaviness and tediousness and general tommyrot. But do I write and complain that and ask Maudie's to withdraw such books altogether? If Maudie came along with a pistol and 2 volumes by Hall Caine, and said to me, "Look here, I'll make you have these," then perhaps I might begin to murmur gently. But he doesn't. I'll say this for Maudie: he doesn't force you to take particular books. You can always leave what you don't want. All these people who are alleged to be crying out for censorship, they're merely idle. If they really want a censorship, they ought to exercise it themselves. Robinson has a daughter, and he is shocked at the idea of her picking up a silly, sham erotic novel by a member of the aristocracy, or a first-rate beautiful thing by George Moore. Am I then to be deprived of the chance of studying the inane psychology of the ruling classes, or of enjoying the work of a great artist? Be damned to Robinson's daughter. I don't care a bilberry for either her or her innocence. I'm not going to be responsible for Robinson's daughter. Let Robinson. If he is such a fool as to suppose that daughters can be spoiled by bad books or good books, let him look after her himself. Let him establish his confounded censorship at the front door or at his drawing-room door. Let him do his own work. Nothing but idleness. That's what's the matter with him. The whole project that Robinson suggests is simply monstrous. He might just as well say that because his daughter has a weak digestion and an unruly appetite for rich cakes, therefore all the cake shops in London must be shut up. Let him keep her out of the cake shops. and all I want is freedom. I don't mean to defend my tastes or to apologize for them. If I wish to hire a certain book, that's enough. I must have it until the police stop it. There can only be one censorship, and that is by the police. A library is a commercial concern, and I won't look at it from any other point of view. I have no interest in the present moment in your notions about the future of literature and the livelihood of serious artists, and so on. All that's absolutely beside the point. And so the sole point is that I am ready to let other people have what they want, and I claim that I've the right to have what I want. The whole thing is simply rot, and there's no other word for it. So that ends the essay. As you can see, well, it's very, of the time. It's sort of veiled, I guess, where he talks about, silly women and stuff, but he's not making a blanket statement about women. In this case, I don't think he's basically saying this one woman was silly, and but the other thing, the main thing I wanted to talk about, like he talks about Mr. Jesse Boot. In case people don't aware, Boots, the chemist, the pharmacy, used to have a lending library. A lot of places did. Harrods, the big department store, which is still in London, had a lending library. Maudie's, he mentions, and there are many others. I have a Maudie's. It's a 3-volume novel. It has a sticker on each of them on the front cover. Maudie's Lending Library. Somebody's tried to peel off one of them, but I bought it just for that, just to have, even if it was just the 1 volume. I was happy to have just an example of it. And I'm actually having something coming in the post that I paid almost nothing for. And it was a book that I wanted, but it's from Harrods Lending Library. So I generally don't buy ex-library books, but I particularly bought this one as an example from Harrods. And at some point, I hope to pick up something from Boots as well, a book that was in Boots' lending library, and so on. It would be nice to have a little example of these things, as long as they're, in half-decent condition and good price. I'm happy for that. But anyway, that ends the essay for today. I'll read the other censorship in the libraries tomorrow. Take care, BookTube. Bye.